Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our conversation with Sophie Neville this evening. For those of you who are just joining us, little bit of background first on Lakeland Arts. We are a major part of the north of England sort of art, culture, heritage scene. We have one of our main aims is to protect the Lake District distinctive cultural heritage, and we want to really keep stories of this wonderful place alive. We've built a really strong reputation of our historic buildings. We have museums, gallery collections, and a fantastic rolling arts programme with a range of cultural destinations embedded in the landscape. Our venues include Abbott Hall Art Gallery, Lakeland Museum, Blackwell the Arts and Crafts House, and Windermere Jetty Museum over in Bowness. Now, my name is Natasha Scullion. I am one of the learning officers as part of the participation and learning team. We are one half of the programming team at Lakeland Arts, and also who will be joining us later on at the Q&A section of our evening is Kerry Offord. She is the head of our curatorial team and the other half of the wider programming team at Lakeland Arts. And to introduce our guest this evening, we have Sophie Neville. And Sophie starred as Titty in the 1974 film adaptation of Swallows and Amazons. She's a writer and former president of the Arthur Ransome Society and has published books including The Secrets of Filming Swallows and Amazons, which is an ebook, The Making of Swallows and Amazons, and memoirs, which include Ride the Wings of Morning and Funnily Enough, which has been serialized in the I Believe magazine. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. We are recording this event and we'll aim to share this with everybody within about 48 hours. The event is very much linked to our boat collection at Windermere Jetty Museum. The museum, I'm very pleased to say, opens up again on the 12th of December. That's Saturday, the 12th of December. And there we have an exhibition that's ongoing. It is Swallows and Amazons Forever, and that is going to be running until the 18th of April, 2021. Now, as part of the evening, we're very much asking people to ask questions throughout the conversation. There is a scroll bar on the right of your screen. Please type in your questions. I'm very sorry, unfortunately, we can't take audio questions, but you're very welcome to type in questions for us. The questions will be moderated, so if you can include your name, the town you're from, and a short question, that will be brilliant, and we will be doing Q&As from the audience towards the end of the evening. So all that leaves me to do is to say welcome, Sophie, to our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this evening. And I thought I probably should get straight in with some of our questions. As part of your incredible experiences of filming such a well-loved story, I wanted really to start off with some themes about kind of your own kind of experiences and kind of the most memorable things that you had throughout the filming of this in sort of in the summer of 1973. So from your experience what was it like working with the other Walkers and the Blackett family? Did you become friends? Were there any rivalries that came up? Sort of what was that experience of working with lots of children your own age or nearabouts?
Well, there were 6 of us. And we were all more or less the same age, except for Stan Grandin, who played Roger, who was 8. In my case, it was a complete miracle that the film was made in the summer of 1973. It was made the year before it was distributed. Because I was 12 and a half, and I was really too old to play Titty. I was skinny, but I had to pretend to be 9. And yet it was such a big part. I think I actually needed the oomph of being a bit older and being able to intellectualize things and know what was happening to actually carry the film. It's a big part. And what was fun was that the girls who played Nancy and Peggy and Susan, we were all 12 or 13. And actually Simon West, who played our older brother, Captain John, was aged 11. But that was good because we had very much a sort of brother-sister relationship with him. I still do. And I still keep up with Susanna Hamilton, who played Susan, who of course went on to be an amazing film actress. She was in another 13 movies, including Out of Africa and Weatherby and Brimstone and Treacle, and wonderful films that that you can still see today. But Swallows and Amazons has been one of the most enduring, and it's been broadcast on BBC Two 5 times in the last 2 years, and it's been on BBC iPlayer, and I believe you can stream it on Amazon Prime. So don't watch your old VHS recording. You'll be able to stream the film now or ask for it to be broadcast again. And when it came to the 40th anniversary, I encouraged the distributors, Studio Canal, to bring out a new DVD, and we did DVD extras for the 40th anniversary disc. So that is the one. If you know anyone who needs a present for Christmas, you can buy these quite cheaply online now, and it's quite fun because the DVD extras explain where the locations are and how we made it, and can answer quite a lot of questions. And it's got Virginia McKenna on the DVD extras. She's still alive, she's still working, of course, and it's been wonderful keeping up with her. She played my mother, so that's really nice to have.
Oh, that's really lovely, and just kind of having that experience. It actually leads me very much into the next question, because I rewatched it recently just to kind of refresh my memory.
Yeah.
And something that very much stuck with me was it looked so realistic. Like you say that you kind of had that sort of brother-sister relationship, and you all got on, which it really translates in the film. It's very lovely to see. So was there quite a sort of an older, like some of the older ones looking after more of the younger ones on set, and have more of that realistic sort of sibling relationship? There's a bit in the film that really stuck out for me, when all the walkers it's the bad day for sailing, because it's all the doldrums and there's no breeze at all, so they go and meet the charcoal burners and get startled, and you have Roger grabs Titty's hand when the old charcoal burner comes out of the hut. And it just looked so incredibly natural and so lovely. I just wondered, is that something that was very much encouraged on set, that sort of experience of kind of being all together and very much sort of life imitating art?
Well, we're very much encouraged to call each other by our character names all the way through, which we did. And that helps you become the character. In that scene with the charcoal burners, what's quite sweet is that Susan really did leave her basket behind. Goes, hey, you've left your basket, and she has to run back and get it. That was for real. I think that Roger held my hand because it says so in the book.
Fair enough.
I had to be very, very loyal to the book. And actually, when we shot that scene, it was really windy, and I don't think we would have noticed, but because when we were there, it was all the trees were blowing around, so they put in the sentence about, well, it is windy now, which was a bit of a shame because I don't think anyone would register. But that was a very special film scene to shoot, and it was a very special film to be in. And we tried to make it as close to the book as possible. And of course, because it was 1973, we could. Because when we got to Bowness, all those lovely old green boat houses that Arthur Ransome knew and loved and went to himself, they were still there. And the bandstand was still there. And George Pattinson, whose collection made up the Steam Museum, he came along in the Lady Elizabeth. And he was there. And you'll have to tell me, have a look at it and see what steamboats are tied up on the jetties. And one secret is that a problem that they had when they were filming that movie was that none of the men in the Lake District wanted to have a short back and sides, and if they were going to appear in the film, so they couldn't find any men to appear as film extras. And in the end, the tall dark native on the jetty in front of the boathouses is my father, and my father appears in it about 5 times. My real father, who's looking after me, because he was the only man they could find aged about 40 who would deign to have his hair cut. There were a few older guys who'd had very little hair left, and the other people, the other men who you see were like the director's assistant, Gareth Tandy. He had his hair cut, and the actor who played Sammy the policeman, He was actually our sailing director. He was an actor. He'd been in the film Kidnapped. And it was a big thing for him to have his hair cut. So much so that in the scene with the policeman, he takes the helmet off to prove to everybody that they have got it back and sides. But having said that, my hair, which went all over the place, was cut by Ronnie Cogan. He called himself Hairdresser to the Stars. He cut Robert Redford's hair and Peter O'Toole and all the big stars who, you know, were then appearing in A Bridge Too Far and other films made in the 70s. Very important. And I think the haircuts made the film. None of us were wearing wigs. Virginia McKenna didn't need to wear a wig. And because there was no makeup or hair and our clothes are very simple, the film hasn't aged. And you think, well, why would it age? But if you look at films of the time, like The Railway Children, they look as if they were made in the 70s. And I do claim, my claim to fame is that I suggested that the director use the Arthur Ransome graphics, the hand-drawn Stephen Spurrier graphics that are on the book, like this. If I hold up, rather than 1970s graphics, which would make it date. Because I love this book, the end plates of the map. I was really inspired by those.
It's beautiful work.
This particular book's quite special because I got everybody who appeared on the film, including Virginia McKenna and Ronald Fraser and Brenda Bruce and everybody else who was in it to sign this book. So that's quite fun.
Oh. What a wonderful memento to keep.
But you've got more questions for me, I know, from people who've written in.
Oh, absolutely. We've had quite a few, which is always lovely. Something else that's come up quite a bit, and it will lead into a secondary question, so I'll sort of ask them together. They're watching the film again and sort of reminding kind of myself, because I watched it previously when I was much younger. So it's the level of freedom that was in there, and the intense practicality of your characters. You know, these are young children that are capable of sailing. They're capable of camping. You know, their mothers made them some tents. They're cooking. They're fishing. You know, the scene where Susan cleans and guts the fish. You know, there's a lot of practical camp skills like demonstrated. Was this something that you already knew as a child cast, or was this something that you were taught ahead of filming? So, you know, you had you got a little bit of help getting ready for that sort of scene.
Well, we were chosen because we were happy doing those things. And I think what made the film is that Captain John and Captain Nancy, the children playing those parts, were really, really good sailors. You can tell, and that's what's exciting about the film. At one point, Swallow comes out from the lee of Peel Island, and you know how blustery it is, can be on sailing on Coniston water, and this gale or pocket of wind hits Swallow's sail, and she does what they would call almost as a Chinese jibe, and Simon West, who played John, he just stands up and he grabs the boom, pulls it down, goes sailing up to the north end of the lake. It's really fluent and classic and special. And the girls playing Nancy and Peggy were very, very good sailors. And you can just tell. In fact, they could all sail better than the director. And I've never been a brilliant sailor, but I was very much used to boats. And actually it's quite difficult pushing Swallow out from the landing place at Peel Island because the mast would get tangled in the trees. And at one stage, if you watch the film carefully, you can see the Swallows are going to they're going north to find the Amazon River, to find the Amazon boathouse, and they leave Titty on the island, and I'm pushing them away, and I've got the telescope in one hand, and I slipped on a stone under the water and fell splash into the lake. But because the shot was so difficult to get, I stood up and I'm waving from the island. It happened, but it was difficult to do. These shots, that just physically filming the sailing sequences was very difficult. And Titty, no one asked me whether I could row. Titty has to row a lot. She rows to the charcoal burners. She rows back to the charcoal burners. she captures the Amazon, and then she and Roger row out to Cormorant Island. When I was we didn't have much time to get ready for the film, but I had this puffin version of the book, and in it I wrote down the things I'd have to do, and the thing that really daunted me was having to dance the hornpipe. I mean, what was that? Well, we did dance a bit, but by that time I had the parrot on my shoulder, real live parrot. All I could do was sort of bob up and down a bit. We were meant to dance the hornpipe. I couldn't owl hoot. The others could. I just couldn't do it. And Titty has to owl hoot, but in fact they wanted to put the sound on that later, so that didn't really matter. I could pretend. But yeah, we had to be confident in boats to make that film, and I think that's what came off. In this paperback, I underlined everything that Titty says, and the director didn't let us see the screenplay, and I've got the original screenplay here. Here it is. That's the script, but I wasn't allowed to see it, and I think that's what gave us a more naturalistic performance. These yellow pages are the revisions, what we actually said. And if there are any inaccuracies, it's because when Arthur Ransome was writing the book, he obviously wasn't in a dinghy with children and didn't really probably check out how long it would take to do things. But when you're there, you don't have time for as much dialogue as there is in the book. It's just like, oh, steamer ahead! We didn't have as much time, and we had to make it much shorter, obviously. But the script was written very carefully, and Mrs. Ransome was there. She edited the script, and she put her foot down. She was very strict. She wanted Titty to be played by an English Rose. That's why I got the part. And actually, she was so upset that Roger had dark black hair that she nearly stopped the filming. But she came. Apparently, she came to Bankground Farm, Holly Howe, and I didn't meet her, but she must have seen us running around. And when she saw the real boy, she said, "Oh yes, that's okay." But the producer thought she should stop the film. We'd already started filming. We'd shot the scenes at the Haverthwaite and Lakeland Railway, the Lakeland Haverthwaite Railway, and that was a miracle. It had only been running for 2 weeks. The restoration had been completed sort of on the 2nd of May. And we were filming 2 weeks later, and that's how the film opens.
That's incredibly well timed.
It was amazing, wasn't it? So all the timing was incredible. They managed to get the financing through for the film very quickly. It wasn't on a big budget, but it was financed by EMI Films. And so we weren't compromised by that. And the edict was we want to film in the locations that Arthur Ransome used. And we went, one of the secrets of the film is that we actually shot on 4 lakes. We obviously did the Bowness scenes on Windermere, and then we shot Peel Island with Secret Harbour on Coniston Water. We did the fishing scenes, which are on the cover of one of the paperbacks, this one. We did the fishing scenes on Elter Water, and was when we got the shark. We fished for the perch and Roger's great shark, and that's depicted there. And then we had to go up to Derwentwater, but actually Arthur Ransome had marked up a postcard for one of his illustrators, and he envisaged the Peak of Darien being on Derwentwater. And we filmed the voyage to the island and the houseboat bay and all the houseboat scenes on Derwentwater with those wonderful Borrowdale Fells in the background, and that really makes it look amazing. But people who know the lakes well get quite sort of seasick when they're watching the voyage to the island, because we're on one lake and then another lake and then another lake. So the voyage to the island, we leave Holly Howe on Coniston Water. We nearly bash into the Turn, which is on Windermere, obviously. And then we end up passing the houseboat Bay, which is on Derwentwater. And then we're back landing on Peel Island on Coniston Water. So it's quite fun if you know the lakes well to think, oh my goodness, where are they now? That was odd.
It's quite a good game of I Spy though for people who know what they're looking for. That's an excellent extra little kind of like nugget of information for it.
But I hope the film has brought the right kind of people to the lakes, and that families have fun finding Arthur Ransome's locations and the locations used in the films. And when I brought out my book about how we made the film, here's the latest. If you want to get it, do get the latest edition. This is the paperback, or you can download the ebook quite cheaply, which is quite nice if you're wandering around, because you can have it on your phone. That's what the
always very useful in the modern age.
Yeah, actually this is available as an ebook as well. And it's quite good because it's got maps of where you can find the locations. And I've got chapters at the back sort of describing how you reach them. And there's a map of Windermere with the Steamboat Museum. Windermere Jetty is marked on it. So that's a must for all visitors. And of course you've got the Arthur Ransome exhibits and his boat, Conchibundu, and all sorts of great excitements. And there's the map of Coniston Water.
Oh, that's beautifully rendered as well.
Yeah, I drew these. And I put them on mugs. So if you're looking for a Christmas present, you can buy these online. And then there's a tiny bit of profit, and I donate that to the charity School Readers.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is a wonderful charity. If you want to help people, if you want to help by listening to school children read, and you could of course introduce them to the Arthur Ransome books, the charity fixes you up with a school that would be a good school for you to go and volunteer at. So it's nice how things come together. And then of course the Arthur Ransome Society has events where they take people to find the locations in the Lake District, and then also further afield, like in the Norfolk Broads, and if you want to go to the Outer Hebrides. And they have these wonderful journals, and people write. So there's your, you've got the original illustration at Windermere Jetty, haven't you? Can you see that, of Titty?
We do. We have a full collection. We're very lucky. We do have Arthur Ransome's first few drafts and sketches of his ideas for what eventually came into the first edition of Swallows and Amazons, sorry, the second edition of Swallows and Amazons. But it's all digitized as well, so you can, when the museum opens on the 12th of December, you can come and have a look and flick through them digitally and see all the glorious illustrations that he did, etched in pen and ink, which is very evocative, I think. So these are lovely to see.
Well, these are this is quite academic articles, and then they have a magazine for children, and then this one's a bit all age group, and at the moment they're celebrating the big 6. But it's been a funny old year this year, but normally they have events, and here you can see they've gone to find some of the locations. This one's the locations in Essex. But it's wonderful, and we've had camps up, the summer camp up in the Lake District, and the Society also offer grants for young people who might want to take part in a Ransome-esque activity. So they could maybe help finance a sailing course or rock climbing course or bird watching, or maybe even exploring and camping, which is what I was mad about as a child. And still,
absolutely, I can 100% agree with you on that. It does lead me actually into my next question, which I think feeds in very well, because personally I think I'm very lucky. I'm 33. I'm sort of the last generation that had an analog childhood, and I was lucky enough to live. I grew up in a housing estate, but kind of very much backed onto fields, and so spent a lot of summer days hunting for newts and ponds and trying to build things on brooks and running around in fields and climbing trees and things. And there's a real, and I think from what you were saying about the film and that experience, it does feel incredibly real. It feels incredibly freeing an awful lot of the time of children being able to play. And I think there is a huge element in the film, especially there's the lovely scene with Titty deciding that she's on the island on her own. She's now Robinson Crusoe, and she's going to have this whole adventure. And yes, really, she is kind of she's doing signal duty, and that's important, but she's going to be Robinson Crusoe right now. And her mum, when she comes to visit, is Man Friday. And it's such a wonderful celebration of imagination, and something that really sort of struck me with the film of how much that is a celebration of it, and just children allowed to be children and to use their imagination and to play. It's very much that the freedom that goes with that, and it's, do you feel that there is an element of it that has had the stories being so enduring and so kind of still striking a relevance with modern audiences? Because watching the film again recently, it was almost alien to see four young children just kind of happily sailing with no adult in sight that's sort of responsible for them, just allowed to sort of get on with things. And so there was a real sense of freedom and being able to go off and adventure. Yeah. Obviously, the incident with Titty sleeping out on the boat on the lake overnight, and the children by the by the jetty having to moor up, this does have repercussions for Captain John at the hands of Mum Walker, which quite rightly. But there is a real sense of freedom in these films and just joy. And I'd love to know your perspective on that, sort of that element of it, and how you think that sort of translates to now, and kind of that relevance.
Well, it's very much a celebration of imagination, but it also reinforces how important exercising your imagination is, because in the end, Titty has the idea of she feeds John the idea of having leading lights, and imagination is very important to get your brain working, and ideas are, there's no time like the present when ideas have never been more important, have they? And we also have to be incredibly practical now, but today those practical skills are freeing, because if you can prove to your parents or teachers that you're responsible, they will give you independence. And today, because we've got better safety equipment and we've got phones and you can keep in contact, actually that should be really freeing up. And we should be able to let children go off and do things, but there's nothing like a sailing boat, because you can, for giving you that sense of freedom, because they can go really fast without fuel. And it is accessible. You can learn to sail today, and you can make it happen. There are clubs and associations and Sea Scouts and things. You can do it. You need a bit of determination. And the Scullies had that. They had to write and ask for permission. They had to pack carefully. And as a child, actually, I really identified with Susan, because I really enjoyed all those practical details. And I didn't think I had a great imagination, but I now can see how important that is to encourage that. And actually filming the scene on Peel Island with Virginia McKenna was amazing, but something went terribly wrong, and it was so embarrassing. I was a little girl, and I hadn't lost all my milk teeth, and one of my eye teeth fell out in the middle of the scene. No. If you watch the film, you can see some scenes when I've got all my teeth, and then some scenes in the voyage to the island, i.e. before the storyline, before Man Friday arrives, the tooth has gone. As we're sailing to the island, which we filmed at the end of the period of the shoot, there is no tooth. And then the beginning, when Titty first sees Man Friday, the tooth is there, and then suddenly it's not. And it was a terrible thing. I mean, nowadays they might be able to quickly make up a bridge or something, but the tooth came out and there was nothing any of us could do about it. And Susanna Hamilton, who played Susan, we made these arrows and we all whittled away on location. Well, you would, wouldn't you? If the prop man was making these, the prop master, and we wanted to make our own bows and arrows. She cut her finger really badly, and she came on set. It's a great bandage. The director wasn't very pleased about that. That was a stop to our whittling activity, but we love doing these. Look, very detailed. We love making those. And actually, the bow and arrow although Titty doesn't shoot the bow and arrow, we all wanted to learn. And that's really influenced my life, because the next film that I was in, I was an archery champion. It's called The Copter Kids. And I had to play the being an archery champion. So I did a bit more practice and got my target archery a little bit better. But I took up archery, and eventually I met my husband at an archery meeting. So if it wasn't for Swallows and Amazons, I probably wouldn't have met him or ever got married. And now our summer days are filled with archery meetings, and I'm always going off like Arthur Ransome's great aunt. She used to shoot apparently on Long Island. I was going off with my quiver and tassels and bows and arrows to shoot the longbow.
Oh, a wonderful way of meeting somebody, though. That's fantastic.
And I still go camping a lot. And in fact, my book, Ride the Wings of Morning, which is somewhere here, there's a copy there. If I dig this out, the whole thing will fall down.
No, I wouldn't ask you to risk throwing books and pennants everywhere.
It's just interesting, because when I was about 30, I went up to Southern Africa. I emigrated to South Africa, and my life was, I led a Swallows and Amazons life, cooking on campfires and camping and taking people on safaris. And if it wasn't for Arthur Ransome, I don't think I would have had the confidence to do that. And we really did gain a huge amount from being the film and just generally living the Arthur Ransome life.
That actually, again, that leads me on really nicely to the next my next question.
Yeah.
With the writings and obviously your experiences from the film, how do you feel, how proud do you think Arthur Ransome would have been in terms of his legacy? What do you think he would have thought about it, of how long it has, obviously this is the 90th year of publication, which is fantastic. Yeah, it's the 90th anniversary. We are still very much talking about it. There are still very new fans enjoying the works. Last summer at Windermere Jetty, myself and some of my other participation learning colleagues, we did a very truncated version of Swallows and Amazons that we did. It was Tales at 2, and we told the story of Swallows and Amazons with props in our boathouse. So it was, we were backed by Swallow and Amazon, the boats from the 2016 film, which was lovely to do. But there was still, we had children who just finished reading the books with their parents, quite young, sort of 6 or 7, who loved the stories and were thrilled. And we had grandparents who had read the books, when they were children, and were thrilled to share them. So from all of that, sort of from your experiences of reading the books and obviously experiencing the film, what do you think were his main, what were the key messages do you think Arthur Ransome would have wanted taken home by everybody who engaged with his work?
I think that he would love the fact that children are still reading his books today, and that people have been encouraged and enthused to sail. And I give quite a lot of talks at boat clubs and yacht clubs on how we made the film. And the number of sailors who come up to me and tell me that they began sailing because of Arthur Ransome, because of reading Swallows and Amazons, and they made it their life, their career. A number of them are called Roger. I think they were given the books, they were called Roger or Susan. And I'm talking about Olympic sailors and circumnavigators, and I think that is a wonderful legacy. I hope that Arthur Ransome and his wife would be pleased with how the film ended up. I'm sure it wouldn't have been perfect enough for them, because it was very much a sort of ode. The book is very much an ode to his own childhood, which is very precious. But I hope that they would have thought we did quite well. Apparently they were very shocked by the Disneyfication of Winnie the Pooh, and they didn't want that. They wanted something naturalistic. They weren't happy with the 1963 BBC series of Swallows and Amazons, which we all, at the Arthur Ransome Society, we think it's great. The children were beautifully cast. Susan George plays Titty, or Kitty. but he didn't like the adult parts to be built up too much. And in the 1963 series, he was there, he was alive at the time, he died in 1967. He didn't like the parts that they built out of the burglars. They made the burglars into a bigger part. But it's difficult if you're making the film, because legally children are only allowed in front of the camera for a number of hours of the day. There's like legal regulations in place. And so as a filmmaker, you want as many scenes with just adults as possible, because you've got to make use of your time, you've got to make use of your crew. And it's logistically much easier if you've got scenes with just adults in, which you can do when the conditions are bad, or after the children need to go home at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So, but in a way, I think it would be really special to make one of the Swallows and Amazons books without any adults in it at all, really. Although they are there in the book. I mean, adults are here in the world. But I think that's one of the reasons why our film didn't date. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was successful. And you know what? If you read the reviews that children write online, they love things like the pillow fight at the end. They want to see explosions. They want to have, it's something that they can do, is have a pillow fight. I mean, any kid can have a pillow fight. They love that. It's accessible. And I think every child's dream is to sail out with your brothers and sisters and no grown-ups to an island and camp and cook your own fish and go on and have adventures. I think it's wonderful. And I hope that children have been able to do that, but they assure me they have. Even if it's, or especially if it's making a boat out of the garden table and the washing line, you know, and imagining it. And I was Titty, they tell me. Or I was Captain Nancy, and I was Titty, and this is what we did when we were little in our back garden. And I think that's wonderful. Wonderful.
Absolutely. Being able to inspire that sort of long-lasting passion for play, and to have that sense of adventure instilled so early on, to then want to go and have have more experiences and really kind of expand their worldview, I think it's a wonderful legacy to have. In terms for you, and kind of linking a little bit back to you mentioning about kind of the reading partnerships and encouraging children to read, had you yourself read Swallows and Amazons before taking part in the film, and did you then kind of read more of the series after that?
Oh yeah, I had read these Puffin books. I was actually a slow reader. I didn't learn to read till I was 9, but then I took off like a rocket. And I thought that I'd read all 12 in the series by the time the film came along. But at the back here, you can see I ticked the ones that I'd read. I think I'd read most of the Lakeland books. I hadn't read Great Northern, there you go. But I had read this. So I read this twice by the time we were filming. And I didn't need to see the script because I knew what Titty said in the book. So this was my script, this Puffin version of the book. It's very easy dialogue anyway. It's a kind of natural things you'd say. So yes, I had loved and read the books before I was in the film. And maybe if I'd been a bit younger, I wouldn't have done. But 6 and 7 year olds, 7 and 8 year olds do start to read the books. And I actually made my book about how we made the film. This one, I've tried to make it for all age groups, so it's suitable for all age groups. The ebook has got a few stories for grown-ups about Ronald Fraser misbehaving in the public houses of the district. But it's not too dodgy. He just was one for the bar. You know, I think it went with the territory then. Those old actors, you know, like Peter O'Toole and Richard Harris, they spent a lot of time in the bars because that's where they met the journalists and that's how they publicised the films. And in my scrapbook here, we kept scrapbooks when we were making the films. And I can remember we used to look, these are my contract. So what a film contract looks like. And we go out and we buy the newspapers. And there we would be in the Daily Express or the Mirror. And look, here it is, which was a real eye-opener, actually. So there we go. What was that? There we go. And nowadays they don't do film publicity like this. They try and keep all the filming secret. But then we had journalists on set with us almost every day. From all the big Times and Telegraphs. Here's one from the Guardian. Oops. And on it went. The scrapbook's quite fun, although it's falling to pieces. But I came from a very Swallows and Amazons family. My father had been, he would be given the first editions of the books for Christmas every year. And actually his father died when he was 8. Not dissimilar to Arthur Ransome, whose father died when he was 13. And his aunt bought him a clinker-built dinghy. And so Dad was that first generation of little boys who learnt to sail because of the Arthur Ransome books. So he brought us up in that same way. So he bought a dinghy for us to learn to sail in when we were little. So I was very blessed in that respect. And as a result, I was confident about getting in and out of boats and manoeuvring boats and rowing around. And we camped as a family, and we camped as a family because that was the only holiday we could afford to do. Well, we borrowed a field and we put up tents and we camped. And so that's that. I came from that kind of Arthur Ransome background, that way of life. And a lot of people now, when they go on holiday, they want luxury, but of course that can be found in the Lake District. And I think it's wonderful that families can go and stay at Background Farm, and they can go out in the Lady Derwenter, which doesn't look like the houseboat anymore, but she did play the houseboat. She was a major star in that respect. And in fact, we've got Swallow from the 1973 film. She's in Kendal at the moment, and if you'll speak very nicely to the people at Sail Ransom, you can maybe go out and sailing in Swallow. And then of course you can go and see Swallow and Amazon from the 2016 film at Windermere Jetty, with Arthur Ransome's own sailing dinghy, Conchi, who looks very like Swallow. She's
very much so. That clinker style, which is beautiful. I think he said that it was kind of the best little boat there ever was. He was very, very fond of Cocky Bondu. We've something that we previously we've been able to do at the museum when kind of before the current situation was something that we did called Jetty Gems, and that was kind of talking about some of the elements of we had in the collection. So we would talk about Cocky Bondu, we did talk about Arthur Ransome, just to kind of offer some extra information for visitors, and we would try to do that. So something it'd be lovely to do when the world kind of comes back to some semblance of normal. But it's those sort of stories and that encouragement to kind of be out and about and really just embrace the landscape of the Lake District, because it is absolutely stunning, and especially all of his Lake District set books very much feel like a love letter to the landscape. For me, as a native Midlander coming up here, and I didn't really know the stories very well at all, so being able to kind of explore the landscape through the books and actually be in the landscape where they were written and he was inspired by it was quite a treat, really. And I'm sure we'll have more questions kind of linked to kind of people's experiences in the landscape as we go kind of later on into audience questions that we'll have answered. So I've got a page on my website. If you go to sophieneville.net, I've got a page called Swallows and Amazons, and that's got links to things you can do as a family and places where you can stay with a Swallows and Amazons theme.
So sophieneville.net, and then you'll see the menu at the top. It says Swallows and Amazons. And if you click right now on my writer's blog, you'll see the photographs that my father took while we were filming at Bowness. And he was just thrilled to see George Pattinson in the Lady Elizabeth just steam into the bay, all in costume. And so you can see pictures of George in the steamboat as on set when we were filming. And then when I came to visit you, there she is, the steamboat being renovated. So I've put that on a blog post on my writer's blog on my website. And I don't know if the links are working at the moment, but the photographs are there, and you can see the triple print prints, you know, that my father and mother took on location. And on my YouTube channel, there's some home movie footage that Dad took of the filming that day, and the film extras arriving off the bus in their costumes and, you know, the right funny little 1929 shoes, and of us filming on the end of the jetty. The film crew perched right at the end of the jetty and us arriving in Swallow. That's quite fun. Then my father had a Bolex, so there's a bit more behind the scenes jerky home movie cine footage of you can see how we made the film, and you can see the crew in their 1970s bell bottoms and then us in our period costumes. So that's quite fun to look at.
Absolutely. It must have been incredibly surreal for you as a 12-year-old to suddenly see a whole area just transformed to an era sort of, 40 years out of time for you.
Yeah.
Well, slightly beyond, I suppose, but and just because obviously the styling in the 20s and obviously the cars and just everything that was set up, it must have been quite a surreal experience. Did that really stick?
Oh, we loved that.
Arriving and seeing all of that.
Yeah, because there was a stop me and buy one ice cream. No, we loved all that, and there was a podium track and things that you don't really see very much, but we loved the interior of the shop. And someone's just written in on Facebook to say, that was their dad's shop, and they know the person who owned the cat. And I went on BBC Radio Cumbria, and we put out it was an anniversary of the filming, 45 years, and we asked the listeners if they knew anyone who'd been a film extra in it. And I'm collecting stories for the third edition of the book on how the film was made. So I'm really wanting to hear from people. And they said, we've just got someone who says that the parrot belonged to their gran. And I said, the parrot! And they didn't realise what an important part the parrot has in Swallow's House. And for me, Titty, the parrot was everything. Because, of course, Titty gets given the parrot at the end of the film. That's the whole climax. And I learned that the parrot, his real name was Beauty, and he came from Kendal. And then one of the drivers, the people working for Browns of Ambleside, who worked as a location driver, he said, I had to go and collect the parrot. And he said it was awful because then the schedule would change and he didn't know what to do with the parrot. And it had arrived, not in a cage, but in a shopping basket with a zip at the top. This parrot. The parrot can't stay in this shopping basket all day. And so they said, well, you better release it into the hotel bathroom. Well, the parrot quite liked being in the hotel bathroom, but the driver didn't like having to catch the parrot afterwards because the parrot was quite vicious.
I mean, they have big beaks and quite strong claws, so I can imagine it was
he had not keen. I was so brave having that parrot on my shoulder because he might have been friendly to his owner, but I wasn't his owner. And he was walking around like inches from my face, and he was quite capable of taking a chunk out of anybody. But I think my mother or Susan or someone said, if you touch one of their feathers, then they won't attack you. Any bird, a swan, if you touch one of their feathers, they won't get violent. So you could see me stroking the parrot for all I'm worth. I was brave, hey? Really difficult work. parrot on your shoulder, and its claws were really long and digging into me. And no, it hadn't
That's
changed.
what you'd expect to have to, like, kind of, you're trying to act and do your role, but also you've got this sort of one eye on something that's moving across you.
On Derwent Water. This wasn't a studio with people all round us. No, this is a houseboat on Derwent Water. I could easily have flown off. Bye.
Well, you certainly can't tell that you are very nervous.
Anyway, lots of memories. All the memories are there. And I can see all the things that went wrong. So like in that houseboat scene, if you listen carefully, you can hear the director going, "Go round!" He wanted us to dance around a bit. And at one stage, oh gosh, we had a safety officer in a frog suit. Remember, we used to call people in wetsuits then, we called them frogmen. He's there in one of the shots. He looks like a seal. You can just see his little head. Not, I think, on the film, but I want one of the film stills. Yes.
Excellent. I shall have to have a look. With being on the houseboat, and obviously, like you spent on as your characters on film. You were in Swallow most of the time, and then obviously Titty was in Amazon, having stolen it. But given it at Windermere Jetty, we have quite a lot of boats, and there's Lady Elizabeth that you've mentioned. Did you get to go on any of the collection boats as just part of the experience of filming? Because we've done quite a lot of renovation on several of the boats, kind of in and around sort of Windermere Bowness at the time. But I just wondered, because in 1973, if you got to go on any of them, just kind of while in between scenes or just as a bit of downtime, because it seems like you were surrounded by some really wonderful boats of the era, and obviously kind of from much earlier, reflecting the 1920s and the 1930s.
My father did. Because my father, remember, was the only guy in the Lake District who would have a short back and sides. My father was the tall, dark native. I have never been on the Tern. I would love to go on the Tern. No, my father was on the Tern. We were in Swallow, nearly hitting the Tern. Really nearly hitting. I mean, really nearly went down. No buoyancy in our boat. All that camping gear. Roger could only doggy paddle. I mean, we wouldn't have been in with a chance. My father actually nearly stopped. It was very dangerous. My father nearly stopped the filming after that, because the director couldn't sail, so he didn't realise we'd lose our wind. And there were safety boats, but they were quite far away, too far away to be any use. So that was dangerous. No, it was my father who was talking to the people and going on the boats on the jetty, and my father, who was standing on the shore at Bowness with the Windermere skiffs. We just went on. We had Nick Newby from Nickel End built a filming pontoon, which we had the camera on, and then we had a grey punt, which we filmed from a lot. And I would just end up in these really boring filming boats. So Nick, I think, also supplied a dory and a couple of dories, and then a 1970s glass fibre boat that we would whiz off on to get to the island, to get to the locations. But no, I didn't go in any of the classic boats, but my father was mad about steamboats, and in our garden we had the hull of a 1901 steamboat. And when I was 17, so about 5 years after making Swallows and Amazons, I helped him renovate it, and we put in a Victorian engine and a boiler, and we had this beautiful steamboat, Daffodil, moored on the Thames for many years, and she was influential in so many ways, and really helped a lot of people with their life choices. So we had classic boats at home, and we still do have. We've still got a punt. It was actually in a Joan Collins film. The film went bust. My father bought the punt, and so I've grown up with classic boats. And when I got married, I kind of inherited a scow, which is a sort of a fiberglass modern version of Swallow. For years we had another lovely launch on the Thames, and my father built a Humber yawl, which we took up to Windermere once and took part in a steamboat rally. So we were members of the Steamboat Association, and I went subsequently on a lot of their vessels, and we take part in the Thames traditional boat rally and things like that. And I'm currently on the crew of a beautiful boat, a shallop. It's called the Draper Shallop, the Royal Thamesis. And if you put that into your search engine, you can see photographs of her. And I've rowed in the Voga Longa at Venice. And 2 years ago, we rowed with our boat club City Barge up the Amstel in Amsterdam and rowed in standing up rowing. So this is in gondolas and sandalos, Venetian boats. We rowed through the canals of Amsterdam. That was really special. So I belong to a traditional rowing club, if you like, and can just about row standing up. Although the shallop is, it's got 6 oars and we row sitting down and we take passengers. So I've been in a lot of ceremonial events, like I was at the Royal Jubilee pageant at Henley, rowing in front of the Queen. And we did the recreation of the Magna Carta being rowed down to Windsor, so things like that. So I've done quite a lot of ceremonial rowing. And
that all sounds incredible.
Titty keeps rowing. And I do a bit of sailing. Last year we sailed up the coast of Norway, which was wonderful. And I thought, oh, Arthur Ransome would like that. He'd like to know that and people often ask me what I did with the money from the film. Well, we didn't earn very much. In fact, I only earned just a little bit more than the parrot. But I spent my fee. I learnt to dive on the Barrier Reef in Australia. And I thought Arthur Ransome would like that because Titty is a great pearl diver, you see. And
very much so.
Yeah, she liked diving for pearls. And the place was stiff with sharks. Stiff with them. I was working actually in television production by that time because I had a big part in Swallows and Amazons and then another feature film. People kept asking me if I wanted to act, but I was much more interested in how the production was put together. And in the behind the scenes photographs, you can see I'm like on the Motorola with a second assistant, and I'm interested in how the schedule was structured and the logistics. And after university, I went to Durham University, and then I went into the BBC on the graduate trainee scheme and went into television production. And by some miracle, I worked on the 2 BBC book adaptations of Coop Club and the Big Six in Norfolk. Julian Fellows was the baddie, and I got to cast the children. I cast Henry Dimbleby as Tom Dudgeon, and found identical twins to play port and starboard. I'm still in touch with some of the members of that cast, including we had 2 Doctor Who's with Patrick Troughton was in it and Colin Baker was Dr. Dudgeon, and that was wonderful because that was sailing on the Norfolk Broads. I was in my early 20s by this time, so because I made that 8-part television drama, which you can get on DVD. I did the DVD extras for it. It's called Swallows and Amazons Forever. We were hoping to then go up to the Lake District and make television adaptations of the books set in the Lake District, but they were just going to be too expensive. So that was a bit sad, and they were just axed by our head of department. But I went on to work on the Doctor Who, and I worked on EastEnders and other book adaptations like My Family and Other Animals, and big dramas that have probably been and gone now, a police series, and a lovely drama we shot in Paris called The Bluebell, which was the life of the Bluebell girls. So I had a wonderful career, if you like, in television drama, and I eventually ended up directing comedy dramas before I left for Africa, and then I did some freelance work in Africa and set up Blue Peter and some natural history documentaries in Africa, and now I'm a writer. So who knows, I might even get to make another film one day.
Well, certainly you can very much see the influence that the stories and the setting, the boats, that sense of adventure has all kind of had that sort of wonderful effect on you from such an early age, and is clearly kind of had a very positive influence. So that's really wonderful. Thank you so much for answering, because these are just kind of a few questions. We've actually had quite a few from the audience as well. So
far away.
If you're all right with that, very much like to ask you some ones from the audience, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So our first one, I think you've pretty much covered this one, but just to kind of maybe a little bit more clarification, we've got a question from Arwen in Holroyd. Were you a Ransome fan or a sailor before the film? I know you were definitely a Ransome fan before the film, but
definitely.
How much sailing experience sort of would you say?
Well, I sailed a bit in an estuary in Wales, and then I was very lucky in that we had a lake at home in the Cotswolds, and I built my own. We had a skiff, the rowing boat, and I added a mast and I made my own sail out of a dust sheet, and I would sail her up and down the lake. So Captain John was like an optimist, and when he was 15, he became the British champion optimist sailor. So I wasn't at his level, but I did sort of teach myself to sail, really. My father taught me, but yeah, I made my own sailing boat. I wasn't brilliant. I'm not very good at reading the wind even now, but yeah, I was happy in a boat, but not brilliant.
Well, the rowing lesson certainly paid off with the amount of rowing you've then done in later life as well.
I don't row very well in Swallows and Amazons, but I was trying to be a 9-year-old rowing, and it's actually quite difficult. Not particularly difficult until you've got the film. You have to remember that we had the pontoon with the camera, and this is a big 35mm Panavision camera on it. So like when I captured the Amazon, I had the cameraman and the camera and some other guy in the boat with me, which made it all a little bit heavier, and also like tipped stern down. So I'm like, I look as if I'm a windmill. I'm rowing like the windmill. It's because the boat was at a funny angle. I did my best.
It certainly works. So I wouldn't have any worries about that. My first real go at rowing was on Windermere in a Windermere skiff. So and I didn't do a very good job of it, I will freely admit. I've got another question from Arwen. We've had a few from several people have sent in multiple questions, which is brilliant. So another one from Arwen. How cold was the water in the swimming scene? That scene worries my mother, which I'm sure my mum would also be worried about that as well. So I will ask for both of them.
Really cold, really, really cold. The first scene we shot in May. There are 2 swimming scenes. The first we shot in May, and I nearly passed out. I was so cold. And if you go onto my YouTube channel, you can see the second swimming scene. We begged the director to move it till when it was warmer, and by the beginning of July, end of June, we were actually swimming in. We were wild swimming on our days off, but it was still quite cold having to do it for the camera. And you can see on the behind the scenes home movie footage that we're running around in our bathing costumes by the lake edge, just trying to get used to the air temperature. But going into the water and having to try and pretend that we were enjoying it didn't work. People write, they say, we can tell that they weren't enjoying it. They say the water's lovely and warm, and you can tell it was freezing. Freezing. It was freezing, and I had to get my head under the water because I meant to be diving for pearls and stick my feet up. So it was worse than swimming with your head up. Yeah, horrible.
Oh,
yeah. So I would advise that. Get a wetsuit. I mean, wetsuits were really rare in 1973. They had to be made for you, and I didn't have one. So that was a shame. I mean, if you were filming it today, you could do it in tanks. They could have underwater cameras. It'd be wonderful. But no, we didn't have anything like that.
Just
it was a real deal.
And hope for the best.
And what was interesting, I'll just say that Virginia McKenna's son, Dan, Dan Travers. He was the diver on the 2016 film. It was so nice when I went to Leicester Square for the big screening, because there was Dan, and I knew him when he was a little boy. And he'd actually been, I think, the safety guy in the Swallow or the Amazon when they were filming. You can't see him, he's lying in the bottom of the boat. But when they filmed the 2016 film, the safety was much tighter than in the early 70s when he died. And so he was actually sailing in the boat in case they had a problem or anything, and he was supervising the safety. So it was really nice to have that connection and to see him at the screening.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I appear as a film extra in the very first opening scene. I'm this doddery old lady on the station platform in the 2016 film. I helped them get some of the finance, some of the private finance right at the end. So I was an investment finder. You just get a thank you on the credit. I didn't make any money.
It's still, I mean, it's lovely that passion, that legacy continues into the new film as well. I think that's really special. Yeah,
I tried to help them, with it, and suggest locations, and the producer came and watched a screening of Swallows and Amazons, my film, in Hackney, and he sat beside me. I'm telling him which lake we were filming at, and pointing out the really dramatic scenes and where they were shot.
Fantastic.
I hope it was useful and saved him a bit of money.
always important, very helpful. Got a question from Jackie, Sophie and Edward, and they're from High Hampsville. Mm-hmm. The question is, as a child, what was your most memorable moment during filming? So the one thing that above all else kind of sticks in your mind.
We rather enjoyed making Ronald Fraser walk the plank. That was a lovely day. You can tell the light was beautiful. We were all on the houseboat together, and we'd been filming for a long time by then. But it was very special shooting those scenes with Virginia McKenna on Peel Island, and just being the two of us and cooking, on the campfire. And she was brilliant at that. And that was lovely. But all of it was wonderful. And you'll see if you read my books, the night scenes in the dead of night. Well, the secret is we never actually shot at night, but those scenes was when Titty's sitting around the campfire by herself in her goatskin cloak, i.e. a blanket. They're shot in the barn at Bankground Farm when it was raining outside.
Aww.
And then Titty's in Amazon, and they had the boat on what they call a cradle, so they could kind of rock it. The carpenter built this cradle, and so I'm in Amazon trying to wrap myself up in the sail and go to sleep. And then they put Swallow on the cradle, and the swallows are sailing. Those night sailing scenes, they're shot in Mrs. Batty's barn at Bankground Farm. But Simon West, he's so good. His performance is so good that I'm watching the film. And I'm watching Susan and John sailing, and she's saying, "John, can you hear the wind in the trees?" And I think he's sailing, and I know that the scene was shot in the barn at Bankground Farm. But he's so good. I'm convinced he's sailing on the lake. Now you can hear the water, you can hear the wind in the trees, and then they crash against the jetty. They don't really crash against the jetty at all.
Testament to good filmmaking, that, and excellent acting. That's always nice to be able to see.
The scene when they shoot the bow and arrow over us into the campfire, that's real. This arrow went zooming over our heads, and you'll have to read my book about it, but it's not a visual effect. It's not CGI. Didn't exist then. That arrow.
It does look very real. As someone who does living history, I'm very aware of how close arrows can get sometimes. Gets interesting.
No, there was a trick to it. It was safe. And it looks so dangerous that they cut it out of the first television version of the film.
I didn't want to encourage young viewers to maybe try to recreate the same scene. I do have another question linked to sort of the day filming with the plank scene.
Yeah.
This is an anonymous question, did Roger / Stephen keep the boats from the top of the cake after the Battle of Houseboat Bay? Do you know at all?
I don't know if he did or not. Someone's given me one since. Really nice. It's just here. I don't see why he wouldn't have done. He might have done. He kept quite a lot of things because we had our scrapbooks. Maybe he has.
Something to maybe find out.
Keep the parrot. We weren't allowed to keep the parrot, but actually my father found a parrot who needed a home. So as a family, we did have a green parrot after the film.
Oh.
I appeared with him on Animal Magic. We loved that parrot. We had parrots for a long time.
Again, that's another extra thing to keep from the film. That's wonderful. Link back to what you were saying about you're being able to spend time with Virginia McKenna. We've had a question from Gareth. He says Virginia McKenna was a huge star after her roles in A Town Like Alice, Carve Her Name and Born Free, but it comes across in the film she's quite happy to play a supporting role to a group of children. Did you feel that she was, really kind of enjoying that role rather than being any kind of like big sort of big film star? Was she very much a supporting sort of presence on set?
She arrived, I think, a couple of days before we started filming, and she was wonderful because she brought us together as a little ensemble. She got us playing consequences and concentration games and really focused us, and that was all. She didn't have to do that, but she did it, and it was really wonderful of her. And she had 4 children of her own, and I think she must have actually asked if she could film while they were at school, because it would be just less disruptive for her as a family, which meant we had to do lessons on location, which was quite a pressure. But she was wonderful, and she got us all focused and more professional, and because we were running around like mad things. But she got us well grounded, and actually it was Susanna Hamilton who was my anchor through the whole thing. If you watch Susan's part, she is absolutely faultless the whole time, and it's not easy. She's got the kettle and the frying pan and the basket and goodness knows what, and it's a very much more difficult part to play than Titty, who's airy fairy and has got some bizarre things to say. But it was a very difficult part to play Susan, but she really anchored us all, and she's a most wonderful, wonderful actress. So I had Virginia McKenna and I had Susanna Hamilton, and they carried the rest of us through that production. They made what it was. They made it what it was, and they both had terribly boring parts, but we needed them. We really needed them. And
she very much comes across as the big sister of the.
Yeah, without being too Enid Blyton-y, or she's very cool actually. But I think Simon West as John, he did very well. The lines aren't easy. They're not easy. And I could only say some of the things that Titty said by just lathering on the charm, She says crazy things. She says, X marks the spot where they ate 6 cannibals.
Just straight off the bat, as you do, carry on.
We are intrepid explorers. There's difficult things to say. But everyone says, it's easier for Sophie. But Claude Wathen, the director, he was very good at fine-tuning our performances, and one of the things he got us to do was, before a scene, he got us to run. We ran all over the Lake District, so by the time we were actually doing the scene, we were actually quite puffed out, but it stopped us getting eggy and worrying about it, and I think it kept us more spontaneous. And it's very difficult to be naturalistic when you've got lights and a huge camera and all people crowded round you. And nowadays, when you make a film, they have a monitor, and so people like the costume and makeup designers, and they watch the monitor. But in those days, you had many more of the film crew round the camera and looking at you, because they have to look after technical aspects like the continuity of the props and things. So it is quite difficult to concentrate. And it was difficult for us because our film set was a boat, and then it would rain. So we had a lot of hanging around, waiting for the sunshine. And what amazed us all was when we went to see the film in London, the press, not even the premiere, the preview, press preview. We couldn't believe how sunny the film looked. And it's because the lighting designer, the lighting cameraman, insisted that we waited for the sun, and we'd wait and wait for the sun. Then an aeroplane would come over. So by the time we shot many of those scenes, we were stiff and cold and bored. And it was very difficult. And it wasn't as if we couldn't always move around. We were sitting in this boat tied to the jetty, standing in the water, and it was cold. So there were aspects of being in the film that were hard and boring and tiring and very cold. And you have to remember that I did most of those scenes in a little cotton dress and a pair of enormous navy blue knickers and sand shoes, and that was it. But as a result, the film says summertime, endless, glorious, warm, beautiful Lakeland summer. Absolutely. And that's the magic of it. And actually, by the time we made Coup Club and the Big Six, I was saying to the costume designer, don't let the children get cold. They've got to be in jerseys. They've got to have vests on and things like that, which she provided. But then you lose that summertime feel. They were needed, but you. So yeah, I put up with being quite cold, and then suddenly I insisted on wearing this dreadful grey cardigan on the scene when we arrive in Rio, and the day was sweltering hot, and you can just see me tearing it off as I get onto the boat. I'm just in the cotton dress. So what's difficult about film acting is the costumes. You're either too hot or too cold or too uncomfortable, but at least we didn't have to wear wigs. Wigs are
very true. It absolutely paid off, though. We've got another question. We've got a few left in the run of it.
Yeah.
So yes, this links on really, really well. From Natalie in Grimsby, she says, the thing that makes the film so special to me is how natural and believable it is. I was completely absorbed by the film every time I watched it, and I entirely feel like I'm taking part. How much did you and the rest of the cast feel like you were experiencing the story whilst filming? Or, and I think you've already answered this bit, did the filming get in the way of that?
Does a bit. Oh, but we were there, weren't we lucky to live the pages of the book? One thing I could say is that we did a lot of those scenes just on one take. You know, you hear when people make commercials, they go to take 21. Not a bit of it. Towards the end, especially, we were really into the Swallows and Amazons world and our characters. And the director he'd film the rehearsal, the last rehearsal. So they'd run through the scene and then they'd rehearse it for the camera and the sound technician and people. And then they go for a take. And he started shooting that rehearsal just in case. And normally the directors will take at least 2 takes, and that's to give the editor options, especially when you're walking and running into a film, because they've got to cut from one angle to another. And you need to just give the editor a bit of leeway. So normally on film then we would take 2 or 3 takes, really for the editor. But it also helped one perfect your performance, if you like, or just try something different. But on the whole, we just only had one chance. I mean, some of those sailing shots are really difficult to get. There were a few errors, and but that makes it quite fun, I think.
Absolutely. I think it definitely adds to the charm of it all.
One of the mistakes we made is the real flag. This is the Swallows flag from the film. I was given it. Isn't that lovely?
It's beautifully done.
This was made by the designer, I think. And actually, the bird is meant to be flying the other way. although I'm sure that Arthur Ransome sometimes drew the swallow flying down the flag. But she should be flying the other way. And one thing that was a pity was that when after Titty's captured the Amazon, she's meant to sail the Amazon back to the island with John, and we didn't do that. And I wish I'd made a fuss and screamed and yelled and said, I've got to be sailing her because I've captured her. But the reality was that the director it was very difficult to get the two dinghies in the same shot, and the children talking to each other across the water is very, very difficult to achieve. And also then they're talking to the Amazon, so it's very difficult to line up that shot, and the director needed Simon to be alone in sailing in Swallow. And we had a sailing director, but he hadn't ever worked on a crew, and he hadn't broken down the script properly. And he didn't teach me to sail Amazon. And of course, Titty does sail Amazon. So I didn't get to take the helm. I sailed her back to Peel Island, and that was a bit of a shame because I could have done that, couldn't I? Also, Amazon was a much easier boat to sail than Swallow. Swallow is terribly difficult to turn because she doesn't have a centreboard, she's got a keel, like in the books. This flag here is the white elephant. If I tilt my camera up a bit, that is the real flag from the houseboat that we captured. And I was sent it by the producer in America. Isn't that nice?
It makes a wonderful prize, especially after capturing the houseboat. I've got two more questions linked more to the books, actually. Kind of, I think it'll carry on from what we've been saying about enjoying the legacy of the books. They're quite linked. So the first one is, which of the series of stories would you choose to become a sequel to the most recent film, the 2016 Swallows and Amazons? And that's from Jackie, Sophie and Edward from High Hampstill. But also, to kind of link in with this, we have an Arwen from Holroyd has said, I think We Didn't Mean to Go to the Sea is one of the absolute best books, not just by Arthur Ransome, but ever written. Do you think we should get a film, or we could get a film or a series starring Nancy Blackett? So it's kind of I thought they're quite similar questions. Yeah. So in general, kind of what book do you think would best be a sequel to the 2016 film, but also specifically, you know, do you think we could get some more Nancy Blackett content because she's brilliant?
I know. Well, you've got Nancy Blackett, the character, and Nancy Blackett, the boat.
Absolutely, we do. So there's two choices there.
Arthur Ransome spent his royalties from writing Swallows and Amazons on buying a little yacht, which he called the Nancy Blackett. And I am a member of the Nancy Blackett Trust because a guy called Peter Willis found the real Nancy Blackett that Arthur Ransome had owned and rescued her, formed the Nancy Blackett Trust. And you can become a member. There's 400 members, and you can get to sail the Nancy Blackett. And she is kept on the Orwell, so where she's near Pin Mill, where Arthur Ransome went to live. And so she's in Suffolk, so it's quite far from the Cumbria. But once you're there, you can sail the Nancy Blackett, and they teach you how to sail her. She was used as the model for the Goblin in Arthur Ransome's boat, We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea, when they sail over to the Netherlands. The Swallows sail by mistake over to the Netherlands. And every other year, they take Nancy to the Netherlands, and I was able to sail her around the inland waterways, not far north of Flushing, which is where they get to. Wasn't that amazing? So you can do that. It is possible. It's really amazing to sail the Nancy Blackett, Arthur Ransome's little yacht. And I think that it would be the most wonderful feature film because you've got the Goblin, you've got the boat in tip-top condition, and you've got the help of all the people in the trust. And she's actually appeared in a feature film, a movie called Ginger and Rosa. And it would be tricky because it's a story about sailing to the Netherlands and sailing her back. And at one stage, a big boat comes down on them and they rescue a kitten. But I'm sure it wouldn't be impossible to make. I think a wonderful sequel to make in the Lake District would, of course, be Winter Holiday, which is the best story. You know, the plot is so good. But it's about a frozen lake and lots of snow in the fells, so it might be a bit tricky to actually make, especially if you were trying to make it in the lakes. It would probably be quite expensive, but it's such a good story. We were going to, Richard Pilbrow was trying to get the permission to film Great Northern in the Isle of Lewis, and I actually went up there, and the Arthur Ransome Society made a documentary which I presented, and so we got to see some of the locations of the book Great Northern in the Outer Hebrides, and that would be very feasible to make. It's not such a good story, that's the only problem. When I worked for the BBC, after making Coop Club and the Big Six, which you can now get on DVD, we were going to make, I said, let's do Swallowdale and Pigeon Post, because they've got the swallows and the Amazons in them. And I actually started to prepare that and started to cast. We hadn't got the scripts. So it was really sad not to realise those books. And they would have been, you know, in the moors, and they wouldn't have been too tricky to film because there's not that much sailing, but the stories are lovely. So to make Swallowdale and Pigeon Post as a pair, that was what we were going to do. It was sad that didn't come off. There are rights to the books that need to be sorted out. At one stage, the BBC did own them, but not anymore. But there are scripts, and David Wood, who wrote the screenplay for my movie of Swallows and Amazons, he was commissioned to make a screenplay, to write a screenplay for We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea, and it's in the archives, and he's still going strong. He won an Olivier for his adaptation of Goodnight, Mr. Tom. He's a award-winning screenwriter, and I think he wrote or sketched out the screenplay for Great Northern and one of the other books. So these are in existence, which is nice because it gives you a start. He says, oh, they'd need to be revamped, and he thought they might be a bit dated now, but it wouldn't be too difficult. And people have written plays. There's a play adaptation of We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea. I haven't seen it, but apparently it's very good. And it's so emotive. And Griff Rhys-Jones made a little drama documentary of We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea, with John aged about 13 sailing her. And when you see a boy aged 13 sailing the Nancy Blackett, and you know, wondering how he got her all the way to Flushing from Pin Mill, it just brings tears to your eyes. It could happen. And I think that if the characters were the right ages, that would be amazing. Really, really moving film. And I think it'd be very popular, and sailing movies are popular. So I think there's a lot of scope there. I'd love to be involved, and that would be wonderful. But it's difficult raising the money for these films that don't promise to be a commercial success. It's very tricky, very tricky. And there's so much at stake. It's so difficult. But hey, one can dream.
You never know. It might be the film that you end up making down the line. So there's always that possibility. So that's we're pretty much at the end of our time now. But I can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time to talk to us all, and for taking so many questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to everybody's question. But thank you so much to everyone watching, for listening, and for asking such brilliant questions. Really appreciate it. There will be an audience sort of survey going out sort of from tomorrow, so on Wednesday. So do keep an eye out for that. For for all the technical help that we've had here this evening as well. We've got some wonderful behind the scenes people who've been keeping everything running. So we have Caroline Robertson and Emma Natras, part of the Lakeland Arts team, as well as Kerry, who has been here kind of on hand to support if I had any very complicated boat collection questions that got ferried towards Lakeland Arts. So thank you all three for being here and being very supportive of this. And thank you, Sophie, for being so wonderfully generous. It's been absolutely fascinating. I've personally had a lovely time. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you so much. And I hope we get to do this maybe again in the future. Thank you again. And I hope everyone listening and enjoying it have had a great time. And I'd just like to wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much.